أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. قال الله في كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذا قيل لهم اسجدوا للرحمن قالوا وما الرحمن أنسجد لما تأمرنا وزادهم نفورا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. My dear brothers and sisters, hosts, scholars, and elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The Quran tells us in chapter number 25, Surah Al-Furqan, ayah 60, that when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the unbelievers of the existence of a compassionate and merciful God, that concept was something that was strange to them. It was foreign to them. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ اسْجُدُوا لِلرَّحْمَنِ. When that name, Ar-Rahman, was brought up, they ask, وَمَا الرَّحْمَنِ? What is this Rahman, compassionate, merciful Lord that you speak of? أَنَسْجُدُ لِمَا تَأْمُرُنَا وَزَادَهُمْ نُفُورًا. And because they were unfamiliar with this name and with this concept of compassion and mercy, it increased in their aversion, meaning that instead of attracting them, it detracted them. So the Arabs of the time, the word and the concept of rahmah was not something that they were very familiar with. They believed in a God, but they did not believe in a merciful God. They didn't believe in a compassionate God. So it's said that, for instance, during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, when the Muslims from Medina, with the leadership of the Prophet, wanted to come back to Mecca, that first year, they were not allowed to enter the city of Mecca. Instead, a treaty was written, and that treaty was known as Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And so, what the Prophet and what the Muslims wanted was that the name of God be mentioned in the same way that we mention the name of God today, when we recite a chapter from the Quran, or when we begin a chapter from the Quran. Bismillah Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Every chapter of the Quran that we begin with Bismillah Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful. To them, the word compassionate was foreign. So they said, instead, let us write Bismika Allahumma. In the name of Allah, with no compassion and with no mercy. See, compassion and mercy was the opposite, and it was antithetical to what they believed was true about God and was true about themselves. See, the Arabs, they were jahil. When we say jahil, what does that mean? When we say jahil, what's the meaning of the word jahil? Usually, we associate jahil with ignorance. We say that this person is jahil, the opposite of alim. However, jahil during those days did not necessarily mean that one was ignorant. Jahil meant that someone, if you were confrontational, if you were rabid, if you can get in someone's face, if you can stand in front of someone and not back down and not have leniency, that was referred to as jahl. And in fact, jahl was something which was honorific for them. So part of their honor, part of their karama was that jahl concept. It was not being lenient with people. It was being able to be rabid and confrontational and defend yourself. Remember, these are people who had lived in the desert and then came into the city. So they brought a lot of those attributes with them. Meaning that they had to learn how to fend for themselves, and they had to learn how to defend themselves. So it was something that was unfamiliar to them. And so because it was unfamiliar to them, the Quran says that when they were introduced to the concept of compassion, of mercy, of leniency, that it increased, وَزَادَهُمْ نُفُورًا, it increased them in their aversion. Meaning that instead of attracted them, it detracted them. They went the opposite way. And if you've ever been in a teaching position, if you've ever tried to teach someone something that they didn't want to learn, or if you've had a student come to class and their heart was not willing to accept the truth, their heart was not willing to learn, it's very frustrating. And maybe forcing a student to sit inside a classroom can work in the short term, but in the long term, what does it do? It pushes them away. So if you've ever tried to teach your children something and they didn't want to learn, or teach your students something and they didn't want to learn, what does it do in the long run? It increases them in aversion. Meaning that they go the exact opposite way that you had intended for them to come. And it's something which is very, very frustrating. So what is compassion? When the Prophet mentions compassion, when he mentions mercy, what is this concept and what is this name that was unfamiliar to them? And why did it become the hallmark of God's attributes? See, we believe in many attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have the 99 names, and beyond just the 99 names, we have other attributes. You know, in the month of Ramadan, in Layali al-Qadr, we recite Dua Jawshan al-Kabir. Dua Jawshan al-Kabir has 100 clauses, and in each one of those clauses, there are 10 attributes. So there are 1,000 attributes of God mentioned in one dua, in one supplication. At the forefront of those, the hallmark of those is what? Even when you recite the 99 names, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. And every basmala contains Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. And both of those concepts, they come from the same basic concept, which is Rahmah, mercy. However, Rahman is a level above basic mercy. So what is mercy? Mercy is when you spare someone, when you have control and you have authority and you have power and you spare someone. That's mercy. Not when you don't have authority and control and power. Some people, they have no authority and no control and no power and they spare people. That's not mercy. True mercy is when you are actually able to hurt someone and you choose not to. When you're able to punish someone, but you choose not to. That's mercy. Imam Ali alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and we are in the nights where we commemorate his martyrdom. In one of his narrations, he says that if you have ever been given power over your opponent, if you've ever been given power over your enemy, sometimes someone abuses you, someone mistreats you, at school or at work or in your community or sometimes maybe within your own family. Now, sometimes the tables turn, the tides turn, and you have the chance to take revenge. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that if you've ever found yourself in that position where you have the ability to take revenge or to hurt someone, as a sign of thankfulness Not as a sign of them deserving or not deserving, but as a sign of thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do what? Forgive that person. Show that person some mercy. Even if they haven't deserved it. But as a sign of thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has given you the ability to now take revenge, to now punish, as a sign of thankfulness, you owe it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy. That's mercy. Compassion is a level above mercy. It's like how we say that you can have patience, which is sabr, but then a level above patience is hilm. So there's a difference between hilm and sabr. Hilm is more than just patience, it's forbearance. Amir al-Mu'mineen also says that that in my life, he says, I have found that hilm, forbearance, is more beneficial to me than the bravest of men. Meaning I can have the bravest of men in my army on my side, defending me. What's more beneficial, I found, is having forbearance, tolerating, having a high level of patience. So in the same way that forbearance is a high level of patience, rahmah, compassion, is a very high level of mercy. In fact, it's a level of mercy that is reserved exclusively to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So much so that even the Quran teaches us that that word can be used interchangeably with God's name, Allah. قُلْ ادْعُوا اللَّهَ أَوْ ادْعُوا الرَّحْمَنِ. Call upon Him by Allah or call upon Him by Ar-Rahman. Meaning that no other person, no other being, no other creature can be referred to as Rahman. That name, that attribute belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, you can name a person Abdul Rahman, but Rahman, the name Rahman, belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, what is that high level of compassion? Because truly, when we describe the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are unique in that our minds, our limited minds, they cannot truly grasp the measure and the magnitude of God's attributes. So to put it in picture, there's a number of concepts that I want you to understand, a number of narrations. One narration says the following. It says that one day, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was walking and he saw a lady who had her child with her, her infant child with her, that she was nursing. And this lady was preparing a fire, and so she turned to him. She said, Ya Rasulullah, this compassion and this mercy that you speak of, God's compassion and God's mercy, is it truly in the way that you say it is? So as she was preparing the fire, the Prophet turned to her, he asked her a question. He said, what would you do, O lady, if your child left you, if your baby left you and started crawling towards this fire? What would you do? Your maternal instinct. She said, of course, Ya Rasulullah, I would throw myself on the fire. I would protect myself. I would protect the baby. I would place myself in harm's way in order to protect my child. He says, if you understand that level of mercy, I want you to know that God is more merciful and more compassionate than you are to your own child. See, when you begin to visualize it, it makes a little bit more sense. Understand what the Quran says on the Day of Judgment. يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ كُلُّ مُرْضِعَةٍ عَمَّا أَرْضَعَتْ. That on that day, on the Day of Judgment, because of shock or fear or anguish, you will find that a nursing mother will toss her child. يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ كُلُّ مُرْضَعَةٍ عَمَّا أَرْضَعَتْ. That bond of mercy, that bond of compassion that you find between a mother and a child, on that day, out of shock and fear and anguish, that disappears. وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى. You see people, and it's as if they're drunk, it's as if they're intoxicated. وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى. But verily they are not intoxicated. But they recognize the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On that day, let me ask you, when a mother tosses her child, and when two brothers don't know each other anymore, and when two tribes members don't recognize each other anymore, who do you turn to on that day? You turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a phrase that is repeated in the supplications of the Imams, alayhimus salam, and it's a phrase that is repeated in Dua Abu Hamza Thumali, which, by the way, is also one of the recommended supplications. It's highly recommended to recite during the nights of Ramadan, but especially during the last 10 nights of Ramadan. And this is a supplication that our fourth Imam, Al-Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, taught to his companion Abu Hamza Thumali. وَأَنَا يَا رَبِّ عَائِدٌ بِفَضْلِكَ هَارِبٌ مِنْكَ إِلَيْكَ. My Lord, I am running away. Harib is someone who runs away. A runner. A fugitive. Someone who's on the run. In the same way that you find a criminal who's on the run, a fugitive, trying to run away from law enforcement so he doesn't get caught. Haribun minka, my Lord, I'm running away from you, but who am I running towards? Haribun minka ilayk. I'm running away from you, but I'm running, such a beautiful expression, I'm running straight to you. Why? Why do we run? Why is it a part of our fitrah, a part of our nature, that when we fear God, but at the same time you turn to God even though you fear God? And this is a phenomenon that's mentioned in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu nazzala ahsan al-hadith. The Quran is ahsan al-hadith. It's the most beautiful and the most eloquent of discourse. Kitaban mutashabihan mathani. It is a book that is similar, meaning that its verses, they flow similarly. You don't find an inconsistency. When you read the Quran from front to back, you don't find an inconsistency. You know that this is authored by one person. And it's also paired, meaning that everything that's mentioned is in pairs. So heaven and hell, reward and punishment, good deeds, bad deeds, the believers and non-believers, the believing man and the believing woman, it's all mentioned in pairs. And then the Quran describes itself and its effect on the believers. تَقْشَعَرُّ مِنْهُ جُلُودُ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُم. Those who have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they read it, their bodies tremble. So number one, they tremble. ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُمْ وَقُلُوبُهُمْ إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. After that, after they tremble and after they fear, then comes the second stage where they are overwhelmed by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because they remember the compassion. They remember that even on the day of judgment, when we run away from our family members, who in this world, when we want emotional support, who do we run to? We run to our mommies and our daddies. Even if you're an adult sometimes, you run to your parents when you want emotional support. On that day, there's no more of that emotional support. Not from your parents, at least. Not from your tribesmen. Certainly not from your spouse. From whom? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُمْ وَقُلُوبُهُمْ إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Then they are overwhelmed, these believers that recite the verses of the Quran, they are overwhelmed by the feeling of compassion and mercy in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So part of the message of Islam was to bring that to deliver that understanding of compassion and mercy to a people who did not understand what it meant to be compassionate or merciful. They understood what it meant to be rabid. They understood what it meant to be confrontational. They understood what it meant to get in somebody's face and defend your honor if you had to. They even understood generosity. but they didn't understand mercy. See, they talk about the Arabs, and by the way, when we say jahil, the Jahiliyyah Arabs, sometimes people have, you know, sometimes people have a wrong perception of who the Jahili Arabs were. They perceive them to be people who were completely backwards, very unintelligent, and very disrespectful. To an extent, that is true, but not completely. Those Arabs also had some good traits about them. In fact, one of the practices of even the believers at the time was that they would be sent out into the desert in order to acquire some of those characteristics. See, even the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he was born in the year 570, in the Common Era, that was during the age of the Jahiliyyah. In fact, it was probably during the peak and the climax of the Jahiliyyah. And the Prophet came from a believing family. His father, even though he had passed away before he was born, was a believer, a monotheist. His mother was also a monotheist. His uncle Abu Talib, who took care of him, his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, they were all monotheists, we believe. However, he was sent out as a baby, as an infant, out into the desert under the care of his nurse, Halima Sa'diyah, in order to acquire some of those attributes. So not everything about the Arabs was terrible. In fact, they were known for their generosity. It's said that if you were roaming on somebody's land, if you happen to pass through somebody's land, a sign of generosity, sometimes if a person of a tribe within his land saw travelers, and during those days there were a lot of Bedouins and travelers, they would get off of their camel and they would slaughter their camel right there on the spot in order to feed the travelers. So they were known for their generosity. They were known for their courage. They were known for their bravery. And even to an extent, they were known for their trustworthiness. They say that during those days, they did not even need to have doors. They lived in tents. They didn't have doors, and the doors did not have any locks. Meaning that they trusted each other enough to where they didn't need doors. They didn't need locks. They certainly didn't need an alarm or a security system. Or today they have the doorbell that has the camera come out. They didn't need any of that. So they had good attributes, but the one attribute that was missing was compassion. That was the secret ingredient that would have completed them. So the message of Islam, when the Prophet came, he didn't necessarily need to teach them generosity, because they were already a generous people. He didn't necessarily need to teach them courage, because they were courageous people. But he had to teach them compassion and mercy. That's why sometimes you find people, sometimes maybe in your workplace or maybe in your community, they have bravery, they have courage, they have generosity, but they don't have mercy. They don't have compassion. Sometimes you see some fathers, they're very, very generous with their children, but they don't have mercy. They don't have compassion. And no matter how generous you can be towards your children, some fathers, some parents I see, they buy everything for their children. But they're not merciful. They're not compassionate. They let their children down. Do you know what kind of imprint that has on the children? So compassion, it's that secret ingredient that makes everything right. And so the Prophet's mission was compassion. And for him to teach compassion, he also had to be a very compassionate person. So how do we understand? We're talking about living in God's compassion. How do we understand God's compassion? Well, number one, a sign of God's compassion is that He sent down Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. This is a verse in the Quran. And Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, during her sermon, she reminds the people of the characteristics of Rasulullah. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. Do you know what harisun alaykum means? Harisun alaykum means He is very protective of you. He watches out for you more than you watch out for your own self. And for that to happen, for the Prophet to make the people understand and learn of God's compassion and mercy, he also had to be a compassionate and merciful person in himself. And that's why the Quran describes him in the following way. It says, فَبِرَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. Out of God's mercy, His rahmah, out of His compassion, لِنْتَ لَهُمْ Ya Rasulullah, meaning that you became lenient with them. Even the people that fought against you, even the people that conspired and plotted against you, the ones who claimed that they were your believers, that they believed in you and that they believed in Allah, but when you turned your back, they stabbed you in the back. You were lenient towards them. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Ya Rasulullah, if you were stern, if you were hard-hearted, these people, they would have abandoned you. So the Prophet, how did he win people over? You know, sometimes we think about the prophets and we assume that the way that they won people over was by their miracles. It wasn't the miracles. Yes, the miracles were a sign of their truthfulness and their trustworthiness. So when Musa was sent with the miracles, when Isa was sent with the miracles, when all of the other prophets and messengers were sent with the miracles, what did that show? That showed the people that these guys are telling the truth. They're not lying. However, to win them over, it required a special touch. What that required was compassion. And the Quran says that we made you, Ya Rasulullah, we made you lenient with them. We made your heart lenient to them. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were someone who was truthful and trustworthy, but you didn't have the ingredient of mercy and compassion, meaning that you were mean with people, that you looked down upon people, you were harsh with people, they would have left you a long time ago. That's why sometimes, you know, you find people who, they know what the truth is, and maybe they're even in a position where they teach the truth, but because they're harsh with people, they're unable to win people over. You don't remember them in a good way. So sometimes you have people in school, professors, teachers. Some of them are geniuses, right? But you think to yourself, how did this person even get to where they are right now? Because some of them, they have terrible akhlaq, they're very harsh, they push people away instead of winning them over. I remember, I'll tell you a personal story. I remember one time, I went to an orientation. If you've ever been to an orientation when you start university or graduate studies, this was for graduate studies. And I had a chance to speak to one of the professors, sorry, not one of the professors, one of the board members of the school that I was attending. And he was a graduate from that school. He had just earned his PhD. Very, very wise man, very smart man. So I went and I spoke to him, I shook his hand. And the first thing that he told me, out of the blue, he said, by the way, just to let you know, in your journey here at this school, you're going to come across some professors, and you're going to think to yourself, how on earth did this person become a professor? Some of them are brilliant, so they earn the position teaching masters and PhD students, but because they're very harsh with people, they don't know how, they don't know how to win people over. Now today, you live in a world where there's mass communication, and there's Yelp, right? You could write a bad review. And for professors, if you haven't discovered, there's a Rate My Professor. So you can go on those websites and you can take all that out, take out all that anger and frustration there. But the point is that even if they know the truth, even if they understand the subject material, what wins you over? If you think about some of the most influential teachers and role models and mentors and coaches in your life, it had nothing to do with them knowing the truth or not knowing the truth, or little to know with them knowing the truth or not knowing the truth. It was the fact that they were merciful. It was the fact that they had empathy. It was the fact that they had compassion in their hearts. So the way you win people over within your own community, within your own society, within your own workplace, within even your own family, because some people, they can't even manage to win people in within their own family. They can't win over their wives, or their husbands, or their siblings, or their children, or their cousins that they're supposed to have influence over. It's because they're very harsh with them. The Prophet was everything but harsh. He was everything but hard-hearted. He was lenient. He was merciful. He was compassionate. With people that would throw feces at him, with people that would throw rocks at him, with people that would insult him in the most terrible of ways, with people that would threaten him in the most terrible of ways. There's a narration that tells us that during one of the battles, when the non-believers, either it was the battle of Badr or it was the battle of Uhud, that during one of those battles, it was suggested by Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, that let us, in order to insult Muhammad, in order to demoralize Muhammad, in order to negatively affect him, let us, imagine this, let us exhume the corpse of his mother from the grave and let us take it to the battlefield. With people like that, he was soft-hearted. With people like that, he was lenient. What did that mean? That did not mean that the Prophet was passive. Didn't mean that. To be soft-hearted and loving with people, you don't have to be passive. There's a way that you could be firm with people. But it's neither being passive, nor is it being on the other end of the spectrum, which is what? Aggressive. You notice sometimes people say that this person's passive-aggressive, meaning that this person doesn't know how to balance their emotions. They don't know how to balance their feelings. They're either on one side where they're too aggressive with people, or they're on the other side where they're too passive with people. Now the key is being in the middle, which is assertive. And that's exactly what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught us. I'll give you an example. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So it said that one day, there was two people, two companions. One of them, he owed the other one some money. And if you've ever loaned anyone any money or any belongings, I mean, it's very, very uncomfortable sometimes trying to retrieve those belongings. And when you're a kid and you loan someone a video game and they don't give it back to you, it can be very, very frustrating. And sometimes you don't know how to deal with it. Now, what does the Quran tell us whenever you enter into a financial transaction? The longest verse in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا تَدَايَنْتُمْ بِدَيْنٍ إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ مُسَمَّى فَاكْتُبُوهُ. O you who believe, if you ever enter into a financial transaction, if you loan someone any cash or gold, or these days cryptocurrency, if you loan anyone anything, very, very simple instructions. فَاكْتُبُوهُ. Write it down. Have a record, an account, have a ledger. Why? Because if you write it down, and the Quran says that if you don't want to write it down, get a third person, a third party to write it down and record if it's uncomfortable for you. And most of the times, you know, we don't follow that advice. If you write it down, then you have a reference that you can go back to. But this companion had not written it down. And he wanted to earn, take back what was his, and he didn't know how to do it. So what did he do? He went to the Prophet. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I have this issue. I've loaned this guy money and he's not giving it back to me. What do I do? So the Prophet, what did he do? He took him by the hand. He went to the door of the gentleman that owed the money. He knocked on the door. The man opened the door. He said, Ya Fulan, it's come to my attention that you owe this person money and you have to pay it back to him. What did he do? He went and he got the money and he paid it back to him. All the Prophet had to do was ask, be assertive, not passive. He didn't say, well, and sometimes we tiptoe around the bush. We want something, but we don't know how to say it. We don't have the courage to say it, and we don't have the assertiveness. So he kind of tiptoed around the bush. He didn't do that, nor was he aggressive. He didn't say, pay up or I'm going to knock you out. He simply asked for it. That's it. And that was a part of his compassionate and merciful personality. And in that way, he knew how to win people over. In that way, he knew how to keep relationships intact. So there's a narration where Imam Ali alayhi salam, he describes the demeanor of the Prophet, his compassionate demeanor. He says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was like a roaming physician. Such a beautiful description. You know, in some countries you go, it's not so common here in the United States, but if you go to Middle Eastern countries or in Europe, one of the benefits, one of the many benefits, I should say, of the healthcare system in many countries, is you can get a house call. You've ever tried a house call? And before, during the old days, you know, and this is very much practiced today, before the days where women would give birth in the hospital, they would give birth at home, a midwife would come. And so, you have a roaming physician, someone who you can call, and they'll make what's known as a house call. They'll come to you, they can diagnose you there at home, and sometimes they have some medicines and some ointments that they can give you. And they have their tools which are ready on hand. They have the stethoscope and whatever else. Imam Ali alayhi salam describes the Prophet in this way. He says, he was like a roaming physician. He always had his instruments ready. He always had his medicine ready. Now the Prophet was not a physician in that sense. He was not an MD. What he meant, what Imam Ali alayhi salam meant was that because of his personality and his character, wherever he went, and if he saw people that were ailing and they were in need of assistance, if they were in need of guidance, if they were in need of healing, he was prepared. You know, today, when you get sick, especially if you get sick for a longer period of time, what happens? Everyone around you gains the title of MD. Everyone in the community suddenly becomes a medical doctor. Try this. Recently I had a family member who was ill for a number of weeks, and so every time people would see me, they would tell me, try this, and I swear to you, he'll be up the next day, up and running. Or try that, and I swear to you, he'll be good. And today, you know, we live in an age of mass information, which means we also live in an age of mass misinformation. So, if you go online, and this is the worst thing, I don't recommend you doing this, by the way. If you ever feel ill, if you go to Dr. Google, and you Google in your symptoms, what happens? Automatically, no matter what it is, whether it's a cough, or it's a pain, doesn't matter where it is in the body, external, internal, automatically you have 6 months to live. If you diagnose yourself online. Why? Because everybody has an opinion. Everybody can now blog. Everybody can type. So, you know, if we're not feeling well and we tell people how we feel, most of the time they give advice that's unsolicited, it's unwarranted, or it's just plain unuseful. It's not useful. Imam Ali alayhi salam says the Prophet, he administered the healing where he saw fit. When you analyze the personality of the Prophet, not once did he say something extra, nor did he hold back and not speak when he was supposed to speak. That was part of his compassionate and merciful personality. That's the way that he won people over. So one way that we feel God's compassion, His rahmah and His mercy is through the character and the personality of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this is one manifestation of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another manifestation of His mercy is something that we read in our ta'qibat in the month of Rajab. See, every month, every season has a certain recommended supplication that we read after our prayers. And you can find all of these in Mafatih al-Jinan. But in the month of Rajab, there's a specific supplication which we read. And in that, we call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we say, Ya man yu'ti man sa'ala. Oh, he who gives the one who asks. When you request something from God, He gives you. Ya man yu'ti man sa'ala. And that's a sign of His compassion and His mercy. Someone who never refuses. A level beyond that, Ya man yu'ti man lam yas'alhu wa man lam ya'rifhu. Oh, He who gives the ones that do not ask Him, and not only the ones that do not ask Him, the ones who do not even know Him, or the ones who do not claim to know Him. Tahannunan minhu wa rahmah. From His hanniya, meaning from His love and affection, and His rahmah, from His compassion. Imagine that. People who are bestowed the blessings and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they recognize Him. Now you can say for yourself that I'm a believer, I'm a Muslim, I'm a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, I come to the masjid, I fast, I'm adamant about attending Salatul Jum'ah, I perform the ziyarah, I perform the hajj, I do all of that, and God gives me. Have you ever thought about the people that never step foot inside the house of worship? And you may know some people like that. That they never step foot inside of a house of worship. And some of them, it's truly for the most ridiculous reasons. Because someone told them not to wear a certain color. So that's it, their relationship with God is severed completely. They stopped praying and they stopped fasting because they had an overly religious person in the family or in the community that judged them. Now I'm not saying it's okay to judge people, but you catch my drift, you know what I'm talking about here. So those are the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them, even if they don't recognize. Now human beings, on the other hand, we're very, very transactional. In order for us to give the person the time of day, in order for us to pay attention to people, in order for us to be kind to people, we have to know them, we have to like them, we have to trust them, we have to have share some sort of common ground with them. They have to follow us maybe on Instagram or Facebook for you to, just to be able to interact with someone and give them the time of day, right? We're very transactional. So if you give me this, if you give me X, I will give you N. That's because we have a very, very weak faith muscle. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I don't care if you follow me on social media. I don't care if you like me. I don't care if you know me. I don't care if you trust me. I don't care what your behavior is, I will continue to give you. That's a sign of God's mercy and His compassion. And see, that helps us understand. There's such a profound message to be delivered in that. That look at how merciful you are with people, how we expect something from people in order for you to give them the time of day, in order for you to give them your blessing, but God doesn't expect anything in return. So that's also one manifestation of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another manifestation is found in the Quran. So, Surah Ar-Rahman, which is chapter number 55, and that chapter is named after that hallmark attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Rahmah. So, it's said in the narrations that when those disbelievers, when they ask that question, وَمَا الرَّحْمَنِ, what is this Rahman? Ya Muhammad, what is this Rahman that you are speaking about? That the chapter, Surah Ar-Rahman, chapter number 55, came as a response. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the first chapter is what? Ar-Rahman. The merciful, the compassionate. And then the next verses that come after that describe what this merciful being is. And there are a number of attributes that are there. One of those attributes, it says, مَرَجَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ. That the two seas come together, they meet with one another, and that there is a barrier between them. There is a barzakh. What is barzakh? When we say alamul barzakh, alamul barzakh is that stage of our life that is a barrier between this life, the dunya, and the akhirah. So you have alamul dunya, which is this world, this transient world that we live in. Then you have alamul akhirah, al-akhirah, which is mentioned in the Quran, the day of judgment, heaven and hell, all of that. And then in between, the mediator is what? Alamul barzakh. So barzakh is that middle ground. So the Quran in Surah Al-Rahman, one of the attributes of the Rahman is that He has brought together the two seas and has created between them a barrier. What does that mean? If you look at the commentaries, some of the commentaries, now there's a sea, there's an ocean somewhere in the world. If you Google a picture of it, you'll find it. There's two seas that come together, and I don't know which country it's in, which territory. They don't cross over one another. So you always find people, they post that picture with that verse, saying that this verse refers to this ocean. But according to traditions and commentaries, it said that the two bahran, the two oceans, are the following. One is spiritual knowledge, and the other is religious knowledge. Now, what's spiritual and religious knowledge? Religious knowledge is your religious knowledge, meaning it's your knowledge of halal and haram. In order for you to function and operate as a Muslim, you have to know what's halal and what's haram, correct? You have to know what the boundaries of your faith are, what the boundaries of your religion. That's religious knowledge. On the other hand, you have spiritual knowledge. And that's the knowledge that allows you to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The mystical, spiritual aspect of us. So according to commentaries, those are two oceans that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought together. The mediator, and this is a sign of God's compassion and mercy, the mediator, that barzakh is what? It's the aql, having intellect. Meaning that when you have the proper intellect, when you have the proper aql, that acts as a mediator between spiritual knowledge and religious knowledge. Meaning some people, they have way too much spiritual knowledge and not enough religious knowledge. Some people have too much religious knowledge. They know everything in the books that's halal and haram and mustahab, makruh and mubah. The mediator between those is having a sound aql, having a sound intellect. Part of that is the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He gave you an aql. And there's a narration, and this is the first narration that you find in the book of Usul al-Kafi. The book says the following, the hadith says the following. It says, and this is from Abi Ja'far alayhi salam, al-Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, he says the following. He says, لَمَّا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ الْعَقْلَ. When God created the aql, when God created the intellect, إِسْتَنْطَقَهُ, He examined it. ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ أَقْبِلْ فَأَقْبَلْ. So God turned to the aql, the intellect, when He created it. He said, come forward. It came forward. ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ أَدْبِرْ. He told it, go back. فَأَدْبَرْ. It went back. ثُمَّ قَالَ. And then when God examined this creation of His, He said the following. He said, وَعِزَّتِي وَجَلَالِي مَا خَلَقْتُ خَلْقًا هُوَ أَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِنْكَ. He says, by my power and by my majesty, I did not create any creature, any creation, which is dearer and more beloved to me than you. وَلَا أَكْمَلْتُكَ إِلَّا فِي مَنْ أُحِبْ. And I did not complete you except through one who I love. Meaning that when you see a person with full intellect, not with a big house, not with a big car, not with a bunch of titles on their name, not with a big following on social media, but rather when you see a person with full intellect, that is a sign of love and mercy and compassion from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of His compassion and mercy, is that He gave you an aql in order to think and in order to make decisions for yourself. And the final sign of God's compassion and God's mercy is that He gave us the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. In dua, in Ziyarat Jami'ah, we read the following. And ziyarah jama'a is a ziyarah which is read in the presence of any one of the imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We say the following to the imams. We say, خَلَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ أَنْوَارًا فَجَعَلَكُمْ بِعَرْشِهِ مُحْدِقِينَ حَتَّى مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا. That when God created you, O Ahlul Bayt, He created you as anwar, as light, as illumination, as radiance. Meaning that before your introduction to this world, you were already created. You already had an existence. You already had a creation. And He kept you in the vicinity of His arsh, of His throne, of His celestial realm. Then when He had love and compassion and mercy towards us, He manifested you in your creation. Meaning that as a sign of love and mercy and compassion, God also gave us the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, that they are a wasila, that they are a means, a vehicle for us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when we look at the compassion and the mercy of God and we ask ourselves, how do I live within the mercy and how do I live within the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Number one is by understanding His signs. That He gave you Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and He gave you the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. He gave you an aql. He gave you the ability to choose. He gave you a vehicle and a means to reach Him. The question is, when you live within the compassion and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are you paying it forward? Meaning that, are you also merciful with other people? Are you compassionate with other people? Are you loving other people? Are you going out of your way to be lenient and soft-hearted with people who maybe abuse you, who maybe aren't the nicest people towards you? So how we live in God's compassion, how we live in God's mercy, is indicated by the way that we reciprocate that to other people. How do you pay it forward to other people? Now I'll leave you with this one narration and we'll end. There's a narration, and some have said that this is merely allegorical, but whether it's allegorical or whether it's real, it tells us of the compassion and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It said that on the Day of Judgment, when the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being passed upon everyone, when it's decided that some people will enter the hellfire and some people will enter the heaven for eternity, there will be one final person. And that person will be damned to the hellfire. And as that person is walking towards the hellfire, he turns around and he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "Oh Allah," he says, "even though that I am a sinner, even though I was disobedient in this life, however, I had hope in your mercy. I did not think that you would punish me. I did not think that you were going to condemn me to hell eternally." And so the narration says that because that person has hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, his entire trajectory has changed. He is taken from hell to the heaven. Because he had hope. See, sometimes when you examine your track record and when you do an audit, you know, when the IRS does an audit, it's very scary. Because you think that there's things that you automatically assume, even if you're not guilty, you automatically somehow assume that you're guilty because they come knocking at your door. You think, okay, well maybe I forgot about something and maybe I am guilty. They're going to hold it against me. If you do an audit of yourself, you realize that there's so much disobedience that we do on a regular basis that we completely forget about. And so we're not always hopeful for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, when you're hopeful, that can change your entire trajectory. In that dua, the dua of Abu Hamza al-Thumali, he says, وَأَنَا يَا رَبِّ عَائِدٌ بِفَضْلِكَ حَارِبٌ مِنْكَ إِلَيْكَ, I'm running from you, towards you, مُتَنَجِّزٌ مَا وَعَدْتَ مِنَ الصَّفْحِ عَمَّنْ أَحْسَنَ بِكَ ظَنَّا. I am running towards your promise. What promise? The promise that you have given to the people who have hope in your mercy. Just if you have hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, brothers and sisters, when you have hope, what begins to happen? You begin to invite the blessings. Your hope acts as an invitation card. See, when you send out an invitation card, not everybody responds to that invitation card. But when you send out the invitation card to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God always responds with an RSVP. Always. He always responds, does not turn away from you. So the first step to living in the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is open up your heart. Begin inviting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into your heart. Begin inviting the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into your life. And once you do so, you shall find the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be true. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring to us His mercy and His forgiveness and His love and His compassion in this holy month. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fill our hearts with His love and compassion so that we may give His love and compassion to others around us. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات إنك على كل شيء قدير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.